And we're live. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to another scene for the Living World of Darkness, Rage Across New York. And we are setting this scene, predictably enough, on the Sept of the Green, though Umber side, this time around, and in a fairly central location to at least the resident Guru. The cabins, what few there are gathered all in one place, not too far from Belvedere Castle, and right there in that kind of middle area, just alongside the path I imagine that runs through them, is the Rock. And the Rock is a fairly good friend of 10 Points, or she likes to think so, anyways. I mean, it's one of 4 living things on Sept that know her name, so that seems like a good indicator. And so, we'll just say that 10 Point is over there with the Rock, perhaps wrapping up a bit of a conversation with the spirit surrounded by flowers. And yeah, is just chilling right out in kind of the middle communal zone.
Yeah, as 10 Point is hanging and chilling, Will returns from his various guardian duties he's returned to. And yeah, is basically going to the cabin and sees 10 Point just kind of hanging around the rock. And he thinks, it's been a while since I've chatted to 10 Point, and then thinks again and thinks probably not since I was by the wild. So he just kind of goes over to say hi. Just simply being social. And yeah, just goes over and kind of nods at her.
And she is... Sorry?
Just a space for me to sit.
And she responds, well, pretty darn positively. She's outright chipper. And yeah, well, gesture close by. We'll say she's probably sat fairly close to and half leaning on the Rock, who is, well, I mean, it's an earth spirit. It's not exactly the most animated thing in the world. But yeah, she'll gesture to an open patch where we'll say there's kind of a ring of flowers going and and several points where one can walk through and a clear spot around the boulder itself. So yeah, she'll gesture to some of that there open grass. Of course, Raya.
She sees a slight twitch at the Raya. Will, please. Oh, what comes and sits down.
Yeah, she will not irritate him further with a show of submission because, well, it's pretty clear he's not game for that whole song and dance. But she'll give a nod. I hear you're doing better. Much better.
Yeah, Will kind of rubs his chin. To find better. If you mean not touched by the wild, then yes, I'm much better.
Better as in cognizant of who you are.
In that way also I'm better. Sorry about your violin.
She kind of pauses, tilts her head a bit. It wasn't actually lost, it seems. The things that we offered in sacrifice seem to have been more a test than actually given. So when I woke up the next morning, it was laying at the foot of the bed. And my connection to Gaia was as strong as it's ever been. I imagine it's much the same for Alana.
Will nod. Well, that's good then. Kind of stretches out.
He'll catch her occasionally, like, stealing a glance over and kind of the usual thing she does with people when she's not sure how to act, where it's kind of brief assessing glances to kind of take an overall, like, she's not that insightful, but to get an overall gist of expression and posture and whatnot. And especially as he stretches out, she just gets a touch more relaxed.
Yeah, I mean, she's kind of assessing body language and general kind of mood. Will actually seems in a pretty good mood. He seems, yeah, in the first few days of coming back from Erebus, he was in a pretty bad way, but having been tortured for 2 months. But yeah, he seems good now. His Arun energy has returned, and we just had a victory against the worm. And yeah, he seems kind of good.
So yeah, she visibly gets a little more lax, a little more comfortable.
So what do you think we should do next?
There's kind of a mild shake of head. Make sure all the chimnages owed are paid. Make sure all the favors have been balanced out. And continue as we've always done. I don't know that there are any other large threats to worry about besides... She nods off to where the secondhand plastics, that vague direction of the city is. Besides Castrophony, who I'm sure is under that factory. We seem to have run out of, well, particularly noteworthy threats. Besides, the worm as a whole.
I disagree. We sent that creature back to the hellhole, but the hellhole still exists. I can't help, like, we defend one of their attacks and then claim it's a victory. Wouldn't an actual victory be if we cleanse that place totally, so it wouldn't happen again?
There's a mild tilt of head, thoughtfully. And that little loft of brows and idle nod and the yeah, fair kind of gesture. It seems to have been such an accepted part of the geography. But yes, it should be dealt with.
I don't know if it's even possible, to be honest. I know that the area has been reclaimed and turned into a park, but...
You mean where it had spread?
No. The seat of the hellhole is called Fresh Kills. It used to be a landfill. Apparently one of the largest in the world, but apparently with the efforts of some glasswalkers, it got turned into a park. But it's still there, even though it's no longer quite so much an affront to Gaia. It's still the hellhole. It's still highly worm-tainted.
She'll mull over that for a couple seconds as well, probably pulling forward a bit of her hair, fiddling with it with one hand. If it has been reduced so dramatically, it's as good a chance as any to do it. Like I said, it seems to have been a feature of the landscape till now.
I can't help feeling... Go on, sorry.
Just if this is the weakest it's ever been. Shrug.
I just can't help feeling that as Garu, we have so few victories, and we're always on the defensive. Wouldn't it be good to actually destroy a place of the enemies instead of protecting our own for once?
There's another faint nod. It wouldn't be easy, but it's not as though forays have never been made into these places. If enough can be brought in. The harder part, perhaps, is even if we can get into there, if we could get to the heart of it, I'm sure there's a tainted cairn there.
Or not. I think it would take effort to influence the humans as well. I don't think to make the area more acceptable to Gaia.
Now, on that, he's obviously hitting her from left field. She's intrigued, but obviously kind of confused as to why humans would really matter.
Yeah, Will sees his confusion and he just says, kind of stops himself. When I was touched by the wild, do you remember some of the things I talked about? Hello?
Yep, sorry.
No.
My Ruby came up. Sorry, can you repeat the last bit for me?
He just kind of stops, seeing that her kind of like puzzlement at the idea of the humans, and says, do you remember when I was wild tainted, some of the things I said to you?
I do.
What did I say about the humans? I seem to remember we had a conversation.
We did. You obviously weren't yourself, though.
So you're wrong. I was myself. I was just myself and something extra.
You spoke on the humans as though they were a plague, bringing the worm with them. You pointed out that the city was overpopulated and that it should be corrected. It didn't seem like a thought very characteristic of you.
What have I told you is a thought characteristic of me? Even when I was touched by the wild, I still knew humans were the key. They're the ones destroying Gaia. They're the ones creating pollution and allow the worm to grow so fast. And when I was touched by the wild, the answer seemed so simple and purge him. Now that I'm, thanks for a word, sober, I know that's not possible. It's not the case. It's not moral. It's not an expression of Gaia's love. It would be an admittance of our failure. But the principle still stands. Humanity is the key. We can't kill them. We can't purge them. And we shouldn't. But we still need to influence them. We still need to have them change. Spirals and banes are still symptoms of the problem and the corruption in the world, not the cause of it. We could kill every last spiral dancer and Gaia would be no closer to being healed.
And she mulls over that for a hot couple seconds. She stops even playing with her hair, just dwelling on it. That is, in a way, saying that purging out, finding a way to purify or remove a cancer that leaves festering wounds behind is no better than it was before. It would still slow the spread. Spirals have been an enemy to the nation long before overpopulation was so bad. I'm not saying that it would cure the problem, but it would certainly help.
So it would help. Of course. All these things would have helped. But at the end of the day, the things that are killing Gaia aren't spirals doing rituals or Fomori dumping toxic waste. It is overpopulation. It's pollution. It's fossil fuels. It's human governments putting the needs of corporations above the needs of their own citizens and Mother Earth. These are the things that are killing us, that are killing Gaia. Spirals, they're just running around, causing some shit. They are flies like the trash heap. To save Gaia, humanity is still the key. I knew that when I was wild touched. I knew it before and I still know it. If we could turn humanity to seeing Gaia's love, all these ways, recycling, clean energy, then that might actually have some real impact in this war. Imagine if the city wasn't so worm-tainted, if the water wasn't so polluted, if the people weren't so depressed, depraved, with Bane finding easy sustenance from them. How much harder it would be for those spirals and our enemies, the ones that we can see and easily fight, to hide from us and influence the world.
She leans herself back a bit, looking up and over him towards just that lovely skyline New York's got. It's hard to imagine a place like this being clean. And humans are admittedly outside of the scope of my education. How all this works. She gestures out. Companies, the governments. It's as good as another language.
I think that's true for most Guru. Even someone like me, who was brought up a human, I'm not an expert in it. All I'm saying is, I feel like we defended the cairn. Good job. But we're all going to celebrate. And we're all going to think that the job's done. And we're all going to be very happy with ourselves. When actually we've achieved nothing in the Apocalypse War. We defended somewhere. We didn't have a real victory. We just prevented the enemy having one.
Your eyebrows pop up thoughtfully again. It's true enough, but in the scope of the war, even small victories have to be celebrated. We have to find happiness in something.
Or shrugs. I think that fight we started is not over. That hellhole's still there. We've weakened it. And what are we going to do now? The other packs are going to leave? We're all going to say that we don't have many enemies to fight? It's right there. It's not going to be easy. It will be way harder than sending it back there. That's its own territory. That is deeply entrenched worm territory. And you're almost certain, and you're absolutely right. I'm almost certain that there is some kind of hive or worm cairn there. They came after ours. We should fucking go after theirs.
And she finally gives, you know, a nod. I don't disagree. In the end, you're right. It stretched out. We pressed it back into its border. And while that is something, it's still there.
How long until it does it
Though-
again? A year? 5 years? 10 years? While we play
Centuries.
whack-a-mole with spirals and banes.
The only assurance that made this the best option was that it took centuries for that thing to grow, enough to stretch out. It buys us time. Buys us a lot of time. And if it's knocked back so far that even the grounds it lays on have been reclaimed, it's still a good first step. And I'm not saying that we've won and that we should treat it like some great victory for Gaia, where we have reached out and stolen victory, but at the same time, if we can't celebrate even the small things, if we can't find happiness between the battles, sooner or later, we have nothing left to give.
What kind of furrows his brow? I'm not against the celebration. I'm against the fact that the Sept seems to think the victory's the end of it. The other packs are leaving. Wartime's going to be declared over. I wouldn't begrudge anybody celebrating. Of course not. We have to remain sane. And we should celebrate what we did. It was a good thing. Unequivocally. But I just hope that in our desperation to find victory, we don't blow out of proportion what happened. That those that gave their lives didn't do it. And that we're not going to capitalize on the victory we've had to create an even bigger one.
Then what do you mean to do? We called in these allies for this battle. We called in our favors for this battle. We could make a case, see if they're willing to stay, but especially those who have come from further and further away. There's another hellhole stretching.
They have their own battles. There are other parts. We need a military force to defend the Sept. If we do something about fresh kills, we won't need military force. Well, we may eventually, but I don't know how we'd fight back against that. I don't know how you cleanse a cairn, a corrupted one, or a hellhole. I'm not a theurge.
Through dramatic means, I imagine, but I am still Cleith, and there's only so much open to me. Have any of us ventured onto the island? Have we looked to see what it's like there, how many Banes there are, how far they reach? Because worst comes to worst, the same tricks that were used to strengthen the Sept could be used to cage them in less and less. Well, more and more until they have less and less to roam. I don't know much about dealing with humans, but I can certainly work on ideas to deal with the spirits if we press in that direction.
Yeah, you only may be a Cleith, but I'm an Adrian, but it's still not up to me. It's up to the Alphas. But I'm going to try and make a case that we shouldn't rest on our laurels in Staten. Well, there's more work to be done. And we'll just kind of shrugs. I'm not sure it'll be an easy endeavor.
I'm sure it won't be.
As Garu, we seem to almost revel in and enjoy and be good at killing Banes and Spirals, and I think that's why we seek them out. If we do this, it won't be that. It might be years. Demonstrations, pressuring. As you say, working little by little to box the worm influence in Staten ever closer until its defenses are weakened.
Sooner or later, even the worm can be frightened. If it is boxed in and caged in and boxed in and caged in, sooner or later it will be either maddened enough to make a mistake, or it'll turn self-destructively on itself.
I would be interested to see what the worm does on the defense. An agent of the nation, I don't think I've realistically ever seen it.
Her eyes narrow a bit as she mulls over, what stories she's heard. If she finally resolves, nothing good. Considering what they do, what the worm does, just to do as it does, the things it must do in acts of desperation. Well, it'll be something.
Well, nods. Here's to hoping. How's your pack doing? I heard Dallas led a mission.
She did. She did when they went onto the field. They gave Dallas command. And all in all, from what I understand, she performed well.
The first mission I led her on when she was on this sept, I had to tell her off afterwards. She didn't follow orders well. In my opinion, didn't fight like a very good Irene. When we went to the Skull Tower there, I was very impressed with her. Me and her stood shoulder to shoulder, while the others could escape. She followed orders.
She's grown.
And she put the safety of others before herself. I was very impressed. She did have say some kind of, sounded like some Viking poem or something. It seemed vaguely suicidal. So I hope she doesn't go too far in that regard.
I don't think she will. There is a certain amount of what our tribes teach us, but she seems to have found something to come back to from the battlefield.
How do you mean?
She just kind of gestures vaguely off into the city. She has... She kind of pauses. Something of a mate? Humans approach it differently. I don't think she has laid claim in an official sense, but she has something to want to come back to. And when that clashed with what she's been brought up to do, or at least taught by her tribe. I spoke to her about it to ensure that she was balanced and ready to go onto the field.
Is it human or kin?
I'm not sure it's either.
What narrows his eyes at this point?
I couldn't say for sure. She kind of holds up a hand, especially with the narrowed eyes. And you know what? Fuck it. He is an Adrian, so there's definitely the defensive little thing.
I should have said narrowed eye, not eyes. But yeah.
All the more intensive. Yeah. No, she kind of puts her hands up, not out in a very dramatic show, but just the little gesture. I have not met her.
When you say not either, is this a... He thinks for a moment. Is this a Chloe situation or an Aiden situation?
I know nothing of Chloe.
Okay, is this a Grant situation or an Aiden situation?
I know that my pack has our suspicions. I don't know if Aiden has actually found out for sure. But I suppose in that case, it would be more of a Grant situation.
You see Will roll his eyes.
Is that another just kind of helpless shrug? This whole romancing thing everyone's doing is a little much for her. There's so many perfectly good kin around.
Weirdly, although Will is when it comes to this, Will is obviously a child of Gaia and a human, incredibly progressive by the standards of the nation. He's very clear that he does have an issue with the Sep's proclivity for supernatural girlfriends and boyfriends.
Yeah, for what it's worth, it's pretty clear as well that 10 Point is just kind of I don't get it. I don't even know for sure, but I don't get it.
Yeah, Will doesn't really say anything about it. He doesn't have anything to actually moralize over. But yeah.
Don't know either way for sure, but she's been warned.
As long as it doesn't get in the way of her duties, I'm sure it will be fine.
That was part of the warning. But all in all, the pack as well. Aiden and his wife have become closer. Dallas has something. Malin is still away on business. And Banshiraya rarely shows around Sept, but is still very good at making her wishes known.
Well, nods. You know, me and Aiden had a talk.
I do. I'm relieved to hear it.
I was surprised, honestly. He approached me.
And she kind of purses her lips into a line for a moment, giving a light nod. I imagine you're well aware of how he's so more short-tempered than even the usual Arun. And I've worked with him on it at length. But most of my attempts meant for very little progress. We finally spoke to the right master. And one of the things that is important is for him to recognize when he is lashed out because of it, and to make it right. You two were... She kind of gestures to him. You two were brothers once. It's good to see that in the end, his temper hasn't made short work of that.
Not just his temper. Mine as well. But anyway, bygones can be bygones. He said he was suffering from depression.
He was teetering on the brink in a bad way. He's finally taken steps away.
I spoke to the truth catcher. My tribe have ways to help with that sort of thing. And I don't know if out of character 10 knows, but they performed the rite of comfort, Will and the truth catcher on Aiden.
Nice. No, I didn't know.
Yeah. I hope he's feeling better for it.
He is. There were points where he backslid, but of late, he's been much improved. She kind of casts a glance out towards the lake. Much improved. He's acting himself. But she is just, there's a, it may not touch her tone per se, but there's just a visible kind of laxing and relief at the idea. It's good to see him smiling and joking and swimming and simply being, instead of being tortured by some thought or another.
Well, nods. He came to me when I was the warder's second, asking about setting up some kind of permanent scouting group. Passed what he said on to the warder. I hope it happens. I think it would be good. Defending the Sept is one thing, as we've talked about, but identifying threats and ways in which we can advance in the city and being more involved in the city in general would be a good thing.
It would. The Sept may be the furthest line, but there's far, far more that we lay claim to and that we haven't been able to protect. Having our kin snatched up blocks away. She just kind of shakes her head. Is unacceptable.
Also, how many threats could we nip in the bud if we knew about them earlier?
Exactly so.
Has 10 got her antlers on at the moment?
Oh, she does.
Does she have the bells in them still?
Oh, absolutely. She's probably got a little white mouse like chilling at the base of one of them as well.
I was cool.
Cleaning his little whiskers.
I was cool with that guy. He's awesome.
But yeah, the bells are still up there. So yeah, as she's moving her head, it's probably just rasping because they're not very jerky motions, but there's probably been the occasional jingle here or there.
Yeah, you will have caught that Will occasionally looks up at the bells kind of disdainfully.
Yeah, if he does it more than a few times, especially as she gives her head that stern shake at the mention of the kin being snatched up, she'll just kind of calmly reach up after a moment and start untying them, tucking them into her swag.
You're allowed to do that?
You are an Adrian and clearly not pleased with seeing them. I have done the same for Jacob in the past when I went to visit him.
I don't care about the bells themselves. I care about what they represent. But 10 this is a conversation we've had before, and I don't wish to lecture you again.
And she,
You can leave them on. It's fine.
She kind of pauses, not in the motion of her hands, but her expression kind of shifts a bit, and she nonetheless continues.
Yeah, if she continues to do it anyway, then she can see that Will, at least in his mind, the idea that she's taking them off voluntarily seems to please him.
I find that things change here. At this point, short of Balian returning, I'm not sure anyone would even notice. I'm just used to them. And she'll eventually tuck the last little bundle into her swag. And resume just kind of comfortably leaning against the rock. I imagine it'll be interesting when Aiden looks to go home to challenge. After spending so long here.
Yeah, that might be interesting. When me and Tanata went to the Sept of the Four Seasons, I think she had something of a shock as well.
I know what to expect and how to behave. It won't be quite as rote anymore, but I find that more and more my pack treats me like family, and I worry for them when we go home.
Why?
And again, there's kind of the awkward press of lips into a line, and her head tilts a bit. You know, not thoughtfully this time, not questioningly, but just that awkward way that people tend to do as they're looking off and down.
You've proven yourself multiple times, as much as anybody here. You don't need to prove yourself to the people back home.
I am not so much worried about what they think of me as how Aiden or Dallas may react once they're reintroduced to home. Admittedly, even there, I may be an Omega, but I am their Omega. But it has been a long time since I've been looked on in scorn, and I feel that how they react, depending on whether or not they readjust, could be detrimental.
Well, it looks like he has plenty to say, but he's not going to say it.
Yeah, well, there'll be a glint of recognition.
I hope it goes well.
I hope so too. And I hope it is not as much as jarring after being here so long as I think it will be. I hope that I'm just being paranoid.
I often wonder what it would be like to go home. But I think it will be a case of getting there and then realizing that it's not home at all.
What is home for you?
Will thinks for a moment and then just nods over to the cabin. I would have said lots of different things. No. I would have probably said back home in England at some point with my mum. But it's not true anymore.
Can't say that I don't miss home myself. But I can't say either that I don't appreciate some aspects of this place, for all that it's very different. I dare say I've become quite used to being seen as people. Though the case could be made that, while I'm recognized as a person, there are still plenty here who know little to nothing about me. Beyond that, I am a medicine and omega and a theurge. Kind of a
Am I
shrug.
one of them?
And this time it's almost a playful tilt of head she adopts. Just the little twitch to the side and a grin. Do you think you know me?
I think I know you better than some, but not as well as others.
I'd say that's fair.
You keep up a... There's a certain mask I think you wear. You're aware of what you're saying. You restrict it. But I think that's true with all of us. I don't think anyone on set really knows who I was before I came here. Before they tied me to that pole.
There's a quirker brow on that one.
They believe me? You think you were treated badly? When you first came here?
Oh, I wasn't treated badly when I first came here. But I'm surprised to hear Ahmed Born was dragged on to Sept and tied to a pole.
For 3 days. They wouldn't let me leave. I wanted to. Tied me to a pole out in the rain. Some giant, terrifying lupus looking after me.
She's still just kind of like not skeptical of what he's saying, but skeptical of the entire notion that that was an okay thing.
They, some glasswalker deleted my passport and all my identification. De-enrolled me from the university I was going to. And made me ring up my mother and tell her that I was never coming home. So if you ever think that William White is not totally enthralled by the nation, you can understand why.
I do have to admit, I can see how that wouldn't endear you to the nation in any way, or seem like the wisest way to coax you to stay on Sept.
I left a few times, and they came and got me. The den mother at the time actually made a promise that if I stayed and for 24 hours, then I could leave voluntarily. If I still wanted to after they'd shown me everything. Needless to say, after 24 hours, I still did want to leave, and that promise was rescinded on.
I have seen many a pig-headed cub, and I have seen a good amount of rough handling, but I can't say that I've ever seen one tied to a pole. Certainly not a Hamid-born.
Will is kind of amused by this. Like he clearly is not like traumatized by it. He's kind of smiling.
Yeah, she's just kind of musing, and seeing as he's in a good spot about it, yeah, she's just like, you know, I've seen a lot of shit, but you know what? You win.
So yeah, there was definitely times I did not think this was home. This was my prison. I made Fostern in the Amazon, and I made Clearth in the Amazon, and I knew when I came back I was going to leave. That was my plan. I'd smiled and said all the things that needed to be said, excluding some outbursts. And I knew once I made clear they wouldn't stop me leaving Sept. So I knew as soon as that happened, I would I would, yeah, leave the sept, jump on a train and never come back. And then pack happened. And I still think for a while it was the option in the back of my head, something that I was kind of saying I would do eventually. And then, yeah, you wake up one morning and you realize that all the people you like are right here. And the place that you care about is right here. And you wonder where you go. You can't go home. You're in Arun. You'd have an argument with your mother within a week. And that's not something I'm willing to risk. You can't get a job. And more importantly, you can't abandon the people that are now relying upon you. So, I was stuck. And after a while, I didn't mind being stuck. I wonder when you guys go back to your sept, if it will feel like a homecoming, or if, well, and he kind of leaves that hanging.
There's a helpless sort of a shrug again, though she will pause to point out. It sounds like a bit of coincidence and good fortune is all that kept you out of a spiral's arms. And cleave alone, especially in a place as wrought with the worm as this is. I don't know how far away the train is, but I feel like there's at least one between here and there.
Could have happened eventually, that's for sure. One's getting closer than you might think. When I was a cub, I snuck out of the sept. And I travelled to Staten Island alone.
Rob like pops open a little bit.
Yeah, and he's like, I never told the Galileo this actually. Maybe I should. As a warning to other cubs. I'll tell Chloe actually. But yeah, I snuck out. I went to Staten. I didn't know it was a bad place to go at the time. And the trees started speaking to me in the Umbra, asking for my help. And they led me to what turned out to be a spiral. I'm not sure it was quite a hive, but definitely a den. I went in and they'd captured a powerful glade spirit there. So I freed it. I was absolutely terrified. And then it led me through the forest with the spirals howling at our backs to its glade. Two of them ambushed me, and I was very lucky, seeing as I was only a cub. And yeah, he's there still. I thought about summoning to sept occasionally, but
yeah, her eyebrows have migrated rapidly towards her hairline.
It's called Gelgamir. And I think he's one of the most powerful tree glade spirits on Staten. Not quite the level of Astrophusa, which I think 10 Point would know is like there's a special word for like the oldest tree spirit in an area, but I can't remember what it is. It's Forest Father or something, but yeah.
And she just kind of shakes her head lightly in disbelief.
Will is clearly kind of enjoying regaling this story. It's a small personal vanity, apparently.
I mean, she's not begrudging it to him. It's holy shit.
So yeah, didn't know at the time, but I imagine if I'd been captured, that would have been, well,
a very different story.
I like to think I'd be strong enough to resist them, but who knows? I wasn't strong enough to resist you lot. And he's clearly intending that as like a half-serious comment.
Particularly as he's saying, I like to think I'm strong enough to resist them. She's just not negating him, but kind of inwardly gives her head like the tiniest shake, like, oh no.
Yeah, we'll appreciate that, and definitely does not take it as an insult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
He knows Gary better than him have turned to the dark side. Well, you got any stories of your own? You do anything incredibly stupid when you were a cub?
I did many things that were incredibly stupid as a cub, and those stupid things were very quickly repaid. But no, I once spent an afternoon with one of the Fae, I suppose. And that was interesting. He was the first person to say something kind about my antlers. Said they looked like a crown. He had, and she kind of gestures in a coiling ram's horn fashion to either side of her head with each finger. Had a pair of his own, but he was very kind to me. But no, just has Alana spoken to any of you? I don't know if the rest of you saw anything during that battle. I know that I'm, and I don't mean to say this because I am what I am, but I know that I'm somewhat weaker to those influences than most, even the first time, even on the rescue mission, where I don't think any other heard. The whispers would crawl into my head, and we weren't even within the reach of the hellhole. But no, during the battle where you and the others fought that Bane, when I went to smash my violin, it was like time stopped. And I was surrounded by blackness. And she is kind of subconsciously pulling into more closed behavior. She was already kind of, leaning back against the rock. But, as she's speaking, the legs kind of pull up a little bit. Her arms kind of cross in. Not really overt, but just subtle cues of withdrawing a little. And the worm spoke. And it wore the voice and the face of the person I cared about most. And perhaps if it had been more clever, perhaps if it had known whose face it was wearing better, it would have been so easy. But when it tempted me, it said things he would never say.
Or just listens, nods. My pact mate seems to think Metis is somehow closer to the worm than the rest of us. I've had the worm's voice inside my head before.
There's not a sympathetic cringe per se, but the hairs on the back of her neck kind of stand up, as it were. It's not as overt as something like a cringe or a wince, but there's a response. We're born of it. No two-guru raised knowing the litany, knowing what they would wreak, would do what our parents do.
Will, I can't be asked rolling dice, but yeah, he has a clear reaction to that. And it might not be the reaction you would expect. He looks like he kind of knows something more about that.
She'll catch it, I assume, unless you would like me to roll for it. I can
Nope,
set up
I
a
don't.
thingy, but
No, she can catch it. I can't. Yeah.
so yeah, she kind of catches it and takes up a counter, like a look, kind of expectant, like hoping that he will be with that little kind of provoked to speak whatever is crossing his mind.
Yeah, he'll just say, there are some in the nation who... There are some of my tribe who've taken each other as mates. I met 2 of them when I went to the Sept of Unbroken Peace. They more or less flaunted it. They said that was their interpretation of the litany, and that it was none of my business. You know how I feel about Metis, 10 point, or rather their treatment and how they're viewed by the rest of the nation. But I've never debated the sin of breaking the litany in that way. You're not in any way responsible for the actions of your parents. But yeah. So when you say 2 right minded Gari would never break the litany in such a way like that, you're wrong. Some are arrogant enough to think that that particular tenet doesn't apply to them.
And not in disagreement, but she still kind of gives a light head shake. It's just, even then, I know that most people define the touch of the worm as something that can be detected and felt. But that is the cause of the worm doing the kinds of things that the parents of a Metis do. It's as good as having it reach out and touch. And she ends up reaching up and kind of grasping at one of her antlers, not like in a forceful way, but just kind of firmly grasping at one of the main, the branch of the antler. There's not many things that are twisted physically that aren't of the worm. Its touch is there, even if it's too little to be caught up by a gift.
You think you're twisted physically? You bear the markings of your tribe's totem.
And I'm thankful to Stag for the gift he's given me and that it manifested this way. That's why I don't like to cut them off.
Sorry, I interrupted your story with a technicality. Continue. Will, again, clearly has things to say on this matter, but is, yeah.
And she takes a minute to reorient. I do mean it, by the way. I do recognize Stag's blessing for what it is. But forgetting that there was a sin like that at the very root of my making, it's really easy for the straight and narrow to become a curve and a spiral. But yes, it was just very jarring. I've always had my den parents, my mentors, and finally my pack standing between me and the worm. And when the time came that I faced it. I feel like I only just barely came out the other side myself. And while some would call it a victory, I feel like it's as hollow a victory as the battle we won.
Coming face to face with the worm's manifestations is no small thing. Use it to strengthen you.
I'm trying.
Learn from it. It doesn't mean you're tainted. The fact that it has to do it means you're not.
She a couple times will kind of start to open her mouth. Like, the lips part the slightest bit, and she kind of reconsiders what she's about to say and kind of closes it again. And this will happen like maybe twice before she finally just settles on a nod of acceptance.
Remember 10 point, I'm an Adrian. That means that everything I say is right.
That'll startle a grin out of her, as opposed to a more stilted reaction. Progress. But yeah, it definitely puts a grin back on her.
Yeah, Will's definitely smiling at that.
It seems ironic. How long have you been a part of the nation?
Just over a year. Funny, eh?
And yeah, she definitely is, rather than bitter about it, kind of taking some amusement in it. And I've been a part of it for a good 30.
30?
Oh yeah, 10 point is markedly older than most of the Gruons out.
Yeah, I mean, he said that in character. Yeah, he'll just be like...
One hell of a Cleith.
The spirits must call for you to push a Fostone, surely.
They have. And for several months, I refused, as I was loath to be of higher rank than any of the members of my pack. But at this point, Balian is so long away, and I think that at this point even he would argue that I serve the pack better from a place of higher position. So I have challenged. It seems, though, that, well, my options both were awkward. So at the time, Felix and I were on better terms. So he is the one I challenged.
Better terms? Are you not on good terms now?
Oh, no. I mean, just the only options that were before me were him or Talate. I felt that it would be inappropriate. And at the very least, very awkward for a Wendigo to have to provide a challenge to a Fianna. Though it doesn't seem any less awkward for Felix. I feel like the greater challenge is in him finding one to present. I'm so different from those who are a step above me. Shrugs. Albeit at this point, I'm fairly sure a viable fostering challenge would be dumping me somewhere in the city I'd never been and just watching me try to bumble back. Kind of rubs at her temple.
I think the test's showing what you've learned. It takes somebody who knows you to really test your weaknesses. I'm sure he'll think of something good.
He has spent a good amount of time with me and with my Rayas. And, yeah, he knows me well enough to say things already that are more poignant than most can manage. So, I imagine that when the time comes that he presents the challenge, it will be suited. But for now, the challenge isn't waiting for it.
I sense some eagerness. Perhaps Felix needs a kick up the bum?
I don't know that that would help. Patience is a virtue. But yes.
I mean, Adrian, I need to be kicking people up the bum on a regular basis. I'm sure he'll think of something there.
I'm sure you will. But yes, I'm waiting, and finally I'm not only willing, but eager to make a step forward. I can only do so much where I stand.
All right, 10 point. It's been good talking, but I can smell. I think it'll be, and he'll kind of sniff the air. It smells like meat and potato coming from my cabin, and I'm hungry.
She grins. Don't let me stop you.
Yeah, well, I'll stand up. And yeah, let's talk again soon. If you have any thoughts about what I said about Staten.
While I don't understand the tactic well, it sounds as though you know what you're talking about. And all things considered, it sounds like as good a tactic as any. I don't know how much I can help reach out to humans.
Tactics is one thing, but the Sept needs to be willing to do it first. If there's only me wittering on about something, that's not going to help.
There's a little back and forth bob of the head. Perhaps so, but many of us respond well to having a direction to push in.
Well, nods. And that's why I've made you aware of this particular direction. I fully expect for you to perhaps talk to your pack about it as well.
Of course.
Anyway, won't keep little Spring waiting. And yeah, he will kind of nod his head and head off to his cabin. Tummy rumbling.
And she'll let him go, letting him get, yay many steps away before beginning to rise herself with a pat to the rock. And I think with that, we can safely end our scene. So thank you, players, for playing. Thank you, watchers, for watching. We will see you next time on the Living World of Darkness. Rage across New York.